She thought she married the love of her life, but 3 days into the honeymoon, she opened a message that shattered two families, rewrote everything she knew about love, and forced her to ask, what do you do when the betrayal comes from both the man you chose and the man who raised you? This is not just a story about a marriage that fell apart. It's about the collision of secrets, sexuality, control, and generational silence. Start the script with the wife's moment of discovery. A video, a message, a voice note, something personal and undeniable, so make sure to subscribe the channel and don't forget to give your feedback. In comment section, she hadn't planned to open her phone. The sea was warm, the sky wide. The scent of coconut oil still clinging to her skin from the morning. They had just come back from a dinner so perfect it almost irritated her. Grilled lobster, champagne, and compliments that felt slightly too rehearsed. She lay on the bed, the hem of her sundress brushing against her calves, his scent on the pillow beside her. Her phone buzzed, one single vibration, one message. It came without context, no greeting, no sender name, just a video. The thumbnail was small, blurry, but she recognized the hotel carpeting. Same dark green as theirs, the same ivory curtain flowing from a half-closed window. The play button blinked, asking for trust. She clicked it. The silence hit first, then the movement. Two figures, one on the bed, the other by the door. She squinted, then her lungs stopped. Her husband's voice, his laughter, low, intimate, familiar, and then unmistakably her father's. Not just a conversation, not just a talk. The room spun, hands, kisses, the clumsiness of practiced passion. Her husband on his knees, her father's hand in his hair. No deniability, no rationalization. Just 10 seconds of a truth to raw for air. She didn't scream. She couldn't. Her throat closed up, a pressure behind her eyes building like storm surge. The video ended. Her heart kept pounding. She watched it again and again, each time, peeling back a layer of the illusion she thought her life was built on. The man she had married, the man who raised her, two pillars of her life leaning into each other in a way that shattered everything between them. And her. She looked around the room, his suitcase by the chair, a cufflink on the floor, the sound of the shower still running. Somewhere in the next room, he was humming. She rose without realizing it. Every love story has a third act. This was hers. But first, we go back, before the blood, before the truth, before the silence exploded into screams. Let's return to the wedding day where everything glittered, and nothing was what it seemed. The guests said it was the most beautiful wedding they had ever seen. The bride was radiant, eyes shimmering beneath a veil that caught sunlight like water. The groom stood tall, handsome and navy, the kind of man who smiled with his whole mouth but rarely with his eyes. Her father walked her down the aisle with a tight grip and a proud gaze, the crowd unaware of the tension crackling between his shoulder blades. Everything was perfectly planned. The roses dyed blush, the string quartet playing softly in the garden, the cake with its hidden lemon layer just for her. They kissed, applause, they danced, tears, they toasted, secrets. He gave a speech, her father, about love and legacy, about handing over his little girl. His voice cracked at the end and everyone thought it was emotion. It wasn't. It was guilt bending his throat. Later, in the fading light, guests murmured how close the groom and her father seemed. Like old friends, someone said. Like brothers, said another. A closeness so casual it didn't register, not until it was too late. She never saw the way her husband's eyes flicked to her father when she laughed. Never noticed the quiet language they shared in nods and glances. Never questioned the family trips, the long dinners, the business advice, the private toasts. Because why would she? They both said they loved her. They both were supposed to protect her. They both were supposed to love her. That night, the bride and groom made love like actors in a romance film. Slow, practiced, polished. And yet she remembered thinking there was something in his touch that felt like it was trying too hard to be passionate, like he was covering something, like he was avoiding something. But the next morning, he kissed her forehead, brought her breakfast in bed, laughed with her over mimosa spills and family gossip. She smiled and pushed the doubt away. Because love is supposed to feel like that, isn't it? It would take 3 days, just 3, for that illusion to shatter like glass dropped in a sink. And when it did, She didn't cry. She watched, over and over, the video again, the touches, the betrayal, the years of manipulation behind it all. She thought about the times her father took her on late-night walks, preaching about good men and trust and honor, about how hard it was to find someone who would love her the way she deserved, and yet he knew, all along, that he had already given part of himself, the part she never saw, to the man she would marry. The symmetry of it made her sick. The silence of it made her scream. She walked to the bathroom door, listened to the water, imagined her father in his study back home, maybe drinking, maybe watching another old video, erasing more truths. She picked up the bottle of champagne on the side table, heavy, cold, smooth in her hand. She stared at the bathroom door. It clicked open. The steam billowed out. He stepped into the room, smiling. That was the last smile he would ever give, because love, when betrayed, doesn't disappear. It transforms into something unrecognizable, into something that, just 3 days earlier, she never believed she was capable of. There is a kind of blindness that comes with being loved too, completely. She had always been her father's girl, the one he carried on his shoulders at picnics, the one he taught to drive stick, the one he hugged too tightly before every school dance. After her mother died, it was just the two of them, a quiet household built on rituals and loyalty. He never dated again, never brought another woman around. He told her it was because no one could compare to her mother, but now that felt like another script written to hide something unspeakable. In the months before the wedding, the signs were everywhere, but only if you knew how to see them. She didn't. Not then. Not when her fiancé started spending late nights with her father under the guise of bonding. Not when she caught them whispering in corners, their voices clipped off the moment she entered the room. Not even when she walked in one evening to find her father holding her fiancé's wrist, in a way that was too tender, too familiar, and both men jumped apart like teenagers caught doing something shameful. She had laughed at it back then. "You two getting bromantic on me," she teased. Her father chuckled, and her fiancé pulled her close, kissed her cheek, told her he was learning how to be a husband by watching a master. She took it as a compliment, folded it into her vision of legacy. The men in her life handing her over like a sacred trust. What she didn't see was the chain being fastened around her instead. She told herself she was lucky. Not every bride had a father who adored her and a groom who respected that love. But something inside her was always watching. Some quiet part of her that twitched when she found the extra toothbrush in her father's guest bathroom, and it was the same brand her fiancé used. That flinched when her fiancé once referred to her childhood home as ours during a toast. That paused when she found a bottle of cologne in her father's closet that wasn't his usual scent, but smelled just like the one her fiancé wore when they first met. The explanations were easy. Coincidence, male bonding, shared taste. It was only later, when she reviewed those memories like forensic evidence, that she realized the ease was exactly the point. They had made it easy for her to believe everything was fine because they had years of practice hiding what was not. Her father had always been a man of control. His suits were iron sharp enough to cut. His routines were monastic. He believed in order, in honor, in keeping emotions tucked into neat boxes. But desire has its own language, and shame is the lock that keeps it buried, somewhere between loss and loneliness. He had created a space for his secrets to survive, and her fiancé had walked into that space, like it had been waiting for him. No one in the family suspected, or if they did, they said nothing. Her aunt once joked that the two men spent more time together than with her. A cousin asked once if her fiancé and father had met before she introduced them. The answer was no. At least, she thought it was no. But there was a flicker, a hesitation she remembered now. When she had first shown her father the photo of the man she was dating, a pause, a tightening in his jaw, before he smiled and said, "He looks like a good man." She had taken it as approval. She had no idea it was recognition. As the wedding approached, the tension in the house shifted. Her fiancé grew quieter, more reflective. Her father became more possessive, insisting on handling the guest list, obsessing over the seating chart, pushing back on her choices. For music and food, tradition, he said. Family pride, she nodded. grateful that he cared so much when she wasn't looking. The two of them would disappear into the study for hours. She heard murmurs. Once, she pressed her ear to the door and caught only silence, thick, deliberate, not the kind of quiet that comes from peace, but the kind that smothers. Still, she told herself it was stress. Weddings were pressure cookers, everyone said so. The night before the ceremony, her father brought out a bottle of scotch he'd been saving for 20 years. She thought it was for them, father and daughter, but he poured only 2 glasses, one for himself, one for her fiancé. She watched them toast, watched their eyes meet in that private corridor where she had never been invited, and for the first time, something inside her recoiled. She left the room early that night, and when she did, the door stayed closed behind her. What they did after that, she never confirmed, but she imagined it later in unbearable detail. The look in their eyes the next morning was calm to calm. Her husband kissed her softly at the altar. Her father's voice shook during his speech. Everyone called it love, but it was rot, and it had already spread. The honeymoon was supposed to be an escape, the fantasy made real, but from the first day, something in her body knew. He avoided eye contact, answered texts late at night, went on long walks alone, said he needed air. She caught him on the balcony once, staring at his phone, his jaw clenched. He told her it was work. She believed him. She believed too many things. Until day 3, until the video, until the lie became something visible, until the truth turned solid. He had just stepped out of the shower, his skin still damp, steam trailing from his shoulders, the bottle in her hand felt impossibly heavy. He smiled, said something she never heard, and that was when the rage bloomed, pure, white, final. The champagne bottle came down without hesitation, once, then again, the sound it made, soft, wet, final, stayed with her long after the blood cooled. She did not cry, she stared, and then she cleaned her hands, wrapped herself in a towel, and made a call. To her father. He answered on the second ring. She told him she needed to talk, said she found something, said she needed him to come alone. He hesitated, just for a breath, and then agreed, because they always did what she asked, because they still thought she didn't know, because they both believed they had control, until the moment they didn't. The hotel room was colder by the time he arrived. She had turned the air conditioning as low as it would go. She wanted to feel something sharp against her skin. The body her husband's was gone, wrapped in sheets, dragged into the bathroom, hidden behind the closed door. The blood had dried in strange shapes on the carpet. It was darker than she thought it would be, not red, almost black. She sat in the armchair by the window, still wearing the towel, still holding the phone. She had been staring at the video for hours, muted, on loop, like a chant, like a curse. The knock on the door was soft, hesitant. Her father, of course. It was. No one else knew where she was. She didn't answer at first. Let him knock again. A little louder. "It's me," he said through the wood. She opened the door slowly. Her eyes met his, and for a moment he hesitated. Something in her expression made his hand fall from the doorknob. She stepped aside. He walked in, looked around, saw the untouched room service tray, the disheveled bed, the suitcase by the wall, but not the blood, not yet. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. The silence between them stretched, thick and unnatural. He stood in the center of the room, glancing at her, then away, like he wasn't sure which version of her he was facing. The little girl who used to hold his hand in crowded malls, the young woman he toasted the night before her wedding, or something else entirely. She gestured to the armchair across from hers. He sat, his knees cracked as he bent. He looked tired, older than usual, and yet there was a stillness in him measured, careful that she had never noticed before. It was the stillness of someone who had practiced hiding. She held the phone up between them, pressed play, turned the volume up. He didn't flinch, didn't deny, didn't ask how she got it. He only looked at the floor, as if searching for a version of the truth that could still save him. But there was none. "How long?" she asked. Her voice, when it finally came, surprised even her. It was quiet, flat. He didn't answer at first. Then, finally, "Before you were born." The words fell like stone. She blinked, and you never told me. He looked up, and for the first time in her life, she saw something like shame. But not regret. Never regret. It wasn't supposed to last, he said. It ended. For years, a beat. And then you brought him home. The room tilted. So you picked up where you left off. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Her hands were trembling. Not from fear, not from pain, from fury. Bone deep, pulsing, generational fury. You were supposed to protect me, she whispered. He closed his eyes. I loved you. I still do. She almost laughed. You loved me like a father. You loved him like... She couldn't finish the sentence. Her throat closed. They both said they loved me. She said again, the words unraveling now, loose and sharp. You said it. He said it. You together. She broke off. You watched me plan a wedding you knew was a lie. He looked at her then, and for the first time, she saw fear. Not of her, but of the truth crawling out between them, finally, visible in the light. He tried to explain, talked about childhood trauma, about loneliness, about needing something he never understood. But every word sounded like dust in her ears. Every excuse felt like a slap. He had built her life like a fortress, rules, standards, expectations. And all the while, he was hiding a truth so obscene it poisoned everything she touched. Love, trust, intimacy, all of it rewritten in one unbearable loop of betrayal. She walked to the minibar, picked up the same champagne opener she had used before. Her fingers curled around the handle like it had always belonged to her. He didn't notice. He was still talking, still weaving a narrative, still thinking that words could undo what action had made final. She moved behind him slowly. He paused when he heard her footsteps, turned his head slightly, but not enough. The opener went in smooth, just beneath the collarbone. He gasped. She didn't stop. The second thrust was deeper. The third hit bone. Blood soaked through his shirt like ink. His mouth opened, but no sound came. He fell forward, knees buckling, hands grasping for something to hold. She stepped back, watched him collapse, watched his body twitch, then still. The carpet drank him without protest. The silence returned. This time, not thick, not heavy, clean, flat, pure. She stood over both of them now. Husband, father, two men who had defined her, two men who had betrayed her, two men who had, in their own way, loved each other more than they ever truly loved her. The room felt colder, or maybe it was just her. She sat again, wiped the opener clean, looked out the window. The ocean shimmered in the distance. Somewhere, tourists laughed. Somewhere, music played. Somewhere, the world went on. She whispered, the words not to them, not even to herself, but to the space around her. What if the men who claimed to love you the most loved each other more? She did not cry. She did not pray. She closed her eyes, and finally, she breathed. There is a silence that comes after violence that does not roar. It hovers. It presses against the walls like humidity. For a long time after the second body stopped twitching, she sat still, as if movement would confirm what had been done. The room smelled of blood and skin, and something faintly metallic beneath it. All the bodies were close, but not touching. Two men who had once shared a secret bed, now shared a grave of silence at her feet. Her father had died slower than her husband. There had been a moment, just one, when their eyes met as the life drained from him. In that moment, she wondered what he saw. A daughter, a judge, a reflection of his own guilt in female form. She didn't ask. He didn't answer. Now, there was only quiet. Outside the window, the sky burned gold. Sunset blurred into twilight. She could hear the muffled sounds of other people's vacations, laughter in hallways, the mechanical hum of elevator doors, a couple arguing over dinner plans down the corridor. The normalcy of it all was offensive. How could the world continue when hers had ended? But that was the truth she was learning now. The world didn't care. It never had. It had watched her walk down the aisle smiling. It had watched her raise glasses and cut cakes and kiss cheeks and thank guests. It had clapped while she pledged herself to a man who was already taken. It had watched and said nothing, just like the people in her life, the aunts who smirked, the friends who whispered, the priest who glanced too long at the way her husband and father stood too close at the altar. Someone had known. Maybe not the full truth, but a version of it, and still, no one said a word. She dragged their bodies into the bathroom, one at a time. She was shocked by how easily her muscles complied. There was no tremble, no gag, only sweat and breath and grit. Her wedding dress, the one she had packed to take photos on the beach, lay folded in the closet. She stared at it now, then turned away. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't shake. That's what surprised her most. Not the act, not the blood, but the calm. It wasn't numbness. It was clarity, the kind that follows rupture, like when a bone breaks, and the shock dulls everything else. She thought of how many times they had touched her, hands on shoulders, hands in hers, hands brushing hair from her cheek. All of it, now recontextualized. All of it now part of a performance she hadn't known she was in. She felt nothing but contempt for the roles they had cast her in: daughter, bride, object, distraction. She wasn't a person to them. She was a veil, something they hid behind. Night fell. She left the bathroom door closed, sat back down by the window, turned the TV on, sound off. Random footage of some sitcom lit up the screen. Laugh tracks playing silently while corpses bled behind the wall. It felt appropriate. Everything had always been performance. This was no different. She checked her phone. No messages. No missed calls. No one looking. No one noticing. She thought about calling someone, the police, her therapist, an old friend. Not to confess. She didn't feel guilt, but to announce it. To drag the truth into the open like a raw wound. But she didn't. Not yet. Not because she feared consequences, but because she wasn't finished. There was still more truth to dig up, still more rot to uncover, and somewhere deep inside, she suspected this wasn't the end of what they'd hidden. She stood up, walked into the bathroom, turned on the shower. The steam rose quickly, mixing with the metallic scent. She stepped over them, washed her hands, scrubbed her forearms, cleaned her fingernails. The water swirled pink, then pale, then clear. She looked into the mirror. For a moment, she thought she saw her mother, not the version in photographs, soft and warm and smiling, but the version her father had never spoken about. The woman behind the legend, the one who had once asked too many questions, who had, perhaps, seen too much. Was her silence a choice, or had she been silenced? Another casualty in a long chain of secrets too shameful to say aloud. She thought back to childhood moments that didn't make sense then, but now replayed with terrifying clarity. Her father locking doors unnecessarily. The phone calls that ended too quickly when she entered the room. Her uncle once making a strange comment at dinner about how close those two had gotten again. The looks, the knowing looks. So many people had looked and turned away because it was easier to leave secrets buried than confront the ugliness behind them. It was easier to pretend men like them didn't exist, that their desire was harmless, that their lives weren't made of flesh and consequence. She dried her hands slowly, tied her hair back, changed into jeans and a dark sweater. Her wedding ring was still on her finger. She stared at it, then slid it off, placed it on the rim of the sink. It looked ridiculous there, a shiny thing with no meaning, a token from a ceremony that had already been a funeral. She looked at her phone again. Still no messages. The loneliness was beginning to change shape. No longer sharp, now dull, now heavy, the kind that settles behind your ribs and stays there. She wasn't sad. She wasn't relieved. She was suspended, somewhere between past and future, between ruin and rebirth. She picked up a notepad from the hotel desk, wrote a single sentence, checked the phone. Then she left it by the bed, walked to the door, opened it, took one last look at the place where everything ended, and closed it behind her. The hallway was empty. She walked slowly, calmly, like someone on her way to dinner, like a woman on vacation, like nothing had happened. The elevator opened with a soft ding. She stepped inside, pressed the button, watched the numbers descend. Her reflection in the mirrored wall didn't blink. When the doors opened, she stepped into the lobby and smiled at the concierge. He smiled back. No one noticed the storm in her. No one saw the ash where innocence had once lived. This was the part no one ever told you about. After the explosion, after the blood, the stillness, the pretending, the quiet resumption of things, the people who nod, the ones who smile, the world that does not stop. She walked out into the night. The wind was warm, the moon high. Somewhere, a group of teenagers were laughing too loudly. A dog barked from a nearby balcony. Life continued. It always did. But something in her had stopped. Or maybe it had only just begun. They found the bodies 2 days later. The hotel room door swung open to silence and the smell of something already gone. 2 men dead. 1 bed. 1 knife. 1 woman missing. The headlines wrote themselves. Newlywed groom and bride's father found dead in hotel room. Bride vanished. Speculation ignited. It wasn't just a tragedy. It was theater. A honeymoon turned horror, with the bride cast as ghost, villain, or victim, depending on who you asked. Once the video leaked, the fire spread faster. 2 men, 1 secret relationship, and the daughter who married into the very lie that raised her. No one asked how it must have felt to see that footage, to realize the people who shaped her identity had built it atop silence, shame, and control. Instead, she was dissected. Every wedding photo, every gesture was reinterpreted. They didn't say betrayed. They said unhinged. They didn't say cornered. They said vengeful. She watched it unfold from a cheap motel off a highway no one remembered. No disguise, no fake name, just stillness, just absence. Sometimes she wondered if she should turn herself in. But what justice could explain what had happened? This wasn't revenge. It was rupture. A violent end to a story written by others. She scribbled notes in motel notepads. They both said they loved me. He was supposed to protect me. I married a lie. The funerals were closed casket. Her father's name vanished from plaques and websites. Her husband's family offered no comment, just distance. Neighbors spoke up after the fact, how they'd felt something was off. Of course they had. But no one said a word until the silence was soaked in blood. Eventually, the story faded. The world moved on, the way it always does. She didn't. She lived in the woods for a while. Read slowly. Burned their gifts. Stopped saying their names. Healing was a myth. But clarity wasn't. In the cold, in the dirt, in the quiet, she began again. Not to forgive, but to stop carrying what was never hers. What they called madness, she called survival. What they called violence, she called truth. And somewhere, deep down, she knew. She hadn't escaped the story. She'd ended it. She had always been the quiet one. The observant daughter, the grateful bride, the careful woman who kept her pain folded small. Like laundry tucked into drawers, she knew how to play the part, smile at the right moment, not in agreement. Shrink herself to fit the frame others had built for her. But when the lie broke open, when the curtain fell, it wasn't her grief that overwhelmed her. It was the silence that followed, the silence that stretched back through generations. No one talked about what men were allowed to do. No one spoke of the secrets they passed through touch, through omission, through a shared gaze over dinner. She had grown up inside that silence, loved within it, lost herself in it. She could have disappeared forever, changed her name, started over. She was young, beautiful still, in that kind of tragic way people romanticize. But how do you rebuild when every memory, every foundation stone of your life is cracked with betrayal? She wasn't just running from what happened. She was running from everything that came before it, from a childhood curated by control, from a marriage built on incestuous deceit, from the idea that a woman must absorb pain like it's a rite of passage. So she wrote one final note, not to them, they were gone, but to the world, the same world that watched, judged, speculated, consumed. She wrote about how love had been weaponized against her, how protection had been used to imprison her, how the 2 men who claimed to love her the most had destroyed not just her trust, but her very sense of reality. She wrote, they both said they loved me, but they loved the lie more. They loved each other more, and they left no room for me in that love. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She simply walked into the lake behind the cabin, shoes off, dressed in the same white blouse she wore the day of the wedding rehearsal, her final ritual. The water was cold, but steady, and as it climbed past her knees, her waist, her ribs, she didn't fight, not this time. She let the weight of everything, pull her under, not because she gave up, but because she finally refused to carry it. She vanished without a ripple. There was no search, no vigil. Just a woman-sized absence in a world that never made space for the truth she uncovered. And now, the question remains, what if the men who claimed to love you the most loved each other more? What if the only way to break the cycle was to step outside of it completely? What if silence is not just inherited, but also chosen? And what if, in the end, she didn't kill out of rage, but out of clarity,